Howdy peeps, it's the Pinking here, and I'm just gonna say it, I think the Grinch is underrated. Now, before you come for my blood, just let me explain why I feel this way. The Grinch, originally created by Dr. Seuss, is a ginormous icon of the Christmas season. Starting out as just another Seuss short story, The Grinch was essentially a retelling of the Scrooge tale, but in a much more simpler way, with him being someone who hates Christmas and vows to steal it away from the Who's because he feels it's lost all meaning. Now, despite being a very short story, The Grinch Who Stole Christmas instantly caught on, with it becoming a yearly tradition to watch and read as the book was adapted into a short animated Christmas special, which has arguably become one of the most iconic Christmas related anything out there. But for me, I wasn't really a fan of The Grinch as a kid. Now that's not to me saying I disliked it, I just couldn't get into it, and I'm not entirely sure why he never caught on for me. The closest I can get is the story just felt a little too short for me. And I know it's supposed to be short, after all it is made for kids, but for me there just wasn't enough time and meat to get invested into this story. That was until I saw the Jim Carrey movie. Now I know this movie has a lot of hate and a few problems, but honestly, I consider it a highly underrated film. Whenever I watch this movie and then see what people say about it, it genuinely surprises me because I question whether we even saw the same thing. But I probably sound crazy to you right now, so let me explain why I think it's underrated. And before you ask, no, I don't think it's better than the special, but it never was trying to compete with the special. More like it was trying to be different, as it wasn't a short special, but an entire movie. And if you know anything about Dr. Seuss movies, that to make one a movie is nigh impossible. With the average being Horton Hears a Who, the awful Cat in the Hat movie, but honestly I still enjoy that movie because just how bad it is, and the absolutely abysmal Lorax movie that butchered the original story all to hell. Safe to say, it's hard to make a genuinely good Dr. Seuss movie. But I'm not gonna lie, I think The Grinch is a genuine good movie that expands on the original story while taking a lot of risks to make it unique. As an example, take the characters. Starting with the Grinch himself, played by Jim Carrey, he is an absolute show stealer, with Carrey making him goofy, mean, and also strangely real. Yes, they do give him a backstory here, but honestly, I think this backstory actually makes what the Grinch does feel more interesting and believable. He's not a guy who hates Christmas just because, but rather a guy who tried to join in but was bullied because of the way he looked. And honestly, that's not a bad idea. It's something that's surprisingly relatable, especially for kids. Hell, I know when I was a kid, I'd get bullied for trying to join in on things because I was different from everyone else. And yeah, it's definitely exaggerated here in the movie, but I don't know if you've met kids, kids are evil. And yeah, this can definitely have an effect on kids, and it's something both kids and adults can understand, and in a way, makes us want to root for the Grinch. Then you have the Who's themselves, which were actually changed quite a bit to be a sort of metaphor for consumerism, and instead having just Cindy Lou represent what Christmas is really about. And I actually really like that idea. Yeah, you could say it's basic, but to me, I feel it works. Because honestly, the real world is often like this. After all, just look at any Black Friday as an example. Hell, if anything, reality is much more extreme than what this movie shows. But to bring it back, I really like these changes in the characters, especially from the source material, which is something almost every Seuss adaptation does. Yeah, if you've read the books, you'd know that they're actually pretty short, with them only having a few pages at most. So adapting a few pages into 90 minutes is extremely challenging. Just look at the Hobbit trilogy as an example. especially when those books were more about having a message and telling a good story, rather than having any interesting characters. And as we've seen with other adaptations, it's rarely ever worked. But here I feel the changes were actually pretty good, with the movie changing the story's message ever so slightly. As now it's not just the Grinch who has to learn, it's the entire town of Whoville. And for me, that's possibly my favourite change. As in the original, the Who's barely noticed that Christmas was stolen, as they choose to sing instead, already knowing that Christmas is all about being together. But to me personally, that's not very interesting. For a children's book intending to teach them a lesson, it works fine enough, but as an adult watching a movie, it makes it harder to come back to them. But making it so the Who's have to rediscover Christmas's meaning is a legit clever idea. The only problem with it is that it could have been handled a little bit better, with the ending possibly needing a little more time and setup. But overall, I feel it works fine, and to have the Who's be more caricatures helps to fit in with the theme of Christmas being more phony and commercialized, but slowly progressing into what it should be. But for me, I feel the key factor that makes this adaptation work so well is the relationship between Cindy Lou and the Grinch. These two have such opposing personalities, yet surprisingly a lot in common, with the Grinch's snark and cruelty bouncing off Cindy's much more hopeful and sympathetic personality quite well. And it's this bond that is the much needed heart of the movie, as just like the Grinch, it eventually grows 3 sizes by the end. With him initially trying to kill her and having nothing to do with her, to then him eventually humouring her by going to the town, to then eventually seeing his mistakes and going on to be a better person from them. I know a lot of people don't like this movie, with some points being fairly valid, such as the weird makeup for the Who's, but overall, I feel this movie is actually far better than what most people say. I think that this movie genuinely had something to say and really wanted to pay respect to Seuss's work by telling the same story but tried to make it a little unique while keeping the same spirit. It's certainly not perfect, but honestly, if it weren't for all the other movies from Dr. Seuss's work, I feel a lot more people would say this movie is great. I feel the bad history and stigma of the other movies is what makes people also believe The Grinch is bad, when in reality it's far from it. So, I still highly recommend you watch this movie. It's funny, heartwarming, and still looks good even to this day. And for me, deserves to be one of the Christmas classics, along with Home Alone, Elf, and even Arthur Christmas, a much more obscure one. I've been the Pink King, and I will see you all next time.